Big E here in the house.
Hey, everybody. Coach K here, Big E from Big E TV. Our top story. It's all bullshit, folks. It's all bullshit. Number one story, Toronto residents should be fearful about a serial killer that's been on the loose for years now, and the first 10 minutes of our national news broadcast is spent on that. Meanwhile, the shithole in chief, he is arguing that climate change is a good thing because it used to be called global warming, and we were all complaining about how cold it was. Hold on, folks. I'm getting this breaking news here. Looks like Lisa Dwinskin from Miami, Florida, has just been booked to come on to the Love Guru show this Thursday. So you want to tune in for that. Lisa is a darling with the media down there in the good old US of A. She's got a co-host, Lawrence Taylor. Some of you sports fans may remember Lawrence Taylor. She's an accomplished author with her book, Metamorphosize. If you haven't got that, pick up a copy. And tune in this Thursday at 6 p.m. with the Love Guru, who's going to be going head-to-head, mano a womano with Lisa, and we're going to have a fun time. New ad for Toyota. It's all around movement, and it shows from a childbirth to little babies to older active aging people that are out there moving, and I think it's getting people inspired for the Pyeongchang Olympics coming up shortly in Korea. People exercising and moving by buying a car, or they were actually, I think, showing some robots, so they get the robots to do like the housework for you. If this is about movement, what kind of world do we live in? This is a car company promoting movement by driving more and biking less, walking less, running less, rollerblading less, or for all those folks in Ottawa, skating along the Rideau Canal to and from work instead of driving your car. So park the car. Toyota's good. I drive a Toyota. Very good quality cars. Nothing against Toyota. But the idea of the car company trying to promote movement. Fox News was caught mid-sentence in the spin zone, trying to discredit this report that came out on Robert Mueller and how the shithole in chief was trying to get him fired. And everyone's favorite dipshit, Sean Hannity, was up there trying to discredit that, going, oh, it's distraction, folks, it's distraction. Well, funny thing, 45 minutes later, he comes back on his show going, yeah, well, you know what, maybe Trump did want to fire the counselor for conflict. You know what, we'll get back to that later, but for now, hey, check out this really cool car chase in Arizona. Oh, it's all distraction, folks, and then later comes on, oh, actually, you know what, it's true, but squirrel. Oh. Anyway, desperate right-wing politicians again have found some way to keep Hillary Clinton relevant. This time it was a story from 10 years ago about how there was a senior staffer who was made some inappropriate gestures at a young staffer there, and now she's coming under fire 10 years later. Distraction? In a related story, Elizabeth May has brushed aside allegations that she was bullying her employees at work. She's okay, they gave him the green light to a full investigation, and she has promised to make those findings public. This is really, again, another attempt for a lot of these, big corporations that are aligned with these right-wing politicians that are trying to muddy the waters by giving a couple of examples there. I'm not buying it, and neither should you. Okay, Parliament is introducing a bill into the House of Commons about protecting women on the Hill and in the workplace. It's already been in place. So, for example, last year there was 6 complaints that they looked into. 2, they opened up inquiries. None were found guilty. Doesn't sound very encouraging when you consider that there probably is a lot more going on. A lot of distraction going on on Parliament Hill. There was a gal from Alberta, the Progressive Conservative Party, Michelle Rempel. She's a member of Parliament Well, she got on her high horse today in the House of Commons, and she was going off, folks, off on how disgusting men are and these unbelievable abuses that are happening in the workforce, and basically, shame on you, shame on you. Well, guess what? It's your party that's the biggest problem. So this idea that the way that they can do this is optics, by making it look like, oh, well, at least progressive conservatives, look at that, they really care. Another person, the Chief of Staff with the Ontario Progressive Conservatives, Alakan Veshki, went on to put out a statement that said, if you've engaged in misconduct, you'll need to step away, and step away now, and if not, that they're going to redefine the term ruthlessness. Holy cow, wow, sounds like those guys are really doing a lot. Until the next scandal that comes out with them. So, as I said, it's all bullshit, folks. You know, it's all distraction. A lot of it's just smoke and mirrors, you know, playing the game. Top 10 songs for 2017. The number 5 song in the all-time world's greatest rock and roll council's 2017 list is Medicate by Theory, or what used to be called Theory of a Dead Man. I saw those guys up in Cold Lake, Alberta a couple years ago. They are fantastic, and Medicate is such an appropriate song for today's day and age, where people are just bored or they're lonely and they're looking to just medicate with some form of drug or stimulant that's going to help bide the time and to make their life seem a little bit more interesting. Just fix me when all the horses have been done, but the man fixes all time. Instead of the old school way, which was like get around people and do some activity together, which all of a sudden now it's social, it's fun, you're getting exercise, typically you're outdoors in nature, and it hits so many marks. So I'm a huge advocate of health and wellness and exercise, and as a result, Medicate by Theory of a Dead Man is one of the top songs of 2017. In sports, the Vancouver Canucks are currently 19-24-6, currently in 7th place in the Pacific Division. They're in a fierce race for the bottom and the number 1 pick in the next year's entry draft. For the NHL, it's kind of a whacked out strategy, you know. So currently the Canucks are 11 points out of the last place with Arizona. So you guys just got to keep digging deep, working harder, and follow your dreams. And if you really, really work at it, perhaps you can get that worst team in the league. Oh, it reminds me of the South Park episode when these kids are playing baseball and they just hate baseball because it's so boring. They're all just standing there. And these kids are just trying to lose every game, and the other team doesn't want to win either because if the winner has to go on to the regionals and they got to play even more. Take the shot! Take the shot! Meanwhile, the parents are all in these stands are like, hoo 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 hoo, they're cheering them on,
What do you want to do, huh? What do you want to do?
And Stan Marsh is getting a fight every game, he's drinking. You want to go? You want to go?
Stop right now!
I'm the best around! Nothing better than me!
I'm warning you, sir!
The best around!
And it's you and me and Big E TV that's going to cut through this BS and talk about things that matter.
For what? Arresting me for what? I'm not allowed to stand up for myself? I thought this was America. Huh? Isn't this America? I'm sorry, I thought this was America.
What are those things, you might ask? Well, funny you should mention that. Well, why don't we start talking about racism, okay? It's been 1 year since that horrific mosque shooting that happened there in Quebec City. And there's politicians there, like the Prime Minister's there, and various politicians going, you know what? Racism happens everywhere. Quebec's no different than anywhere else. Really? against Muslims? Is that why that the last federal election, Stephen Harper was trying to win points there by opening up a hotline that if you saw any suspicious terrorist activity that you should report it immediately? And in the wake of that horrible event in Quebec City, you would think that of course, lots of great people in Quebec. I love Quebec City. That's an amazing place. And there's lots of fantastic community support around those that were injured and murdered there. But in terms of the actual stats, the reality is that the Islamic hate crimes and the incidents in that region have doubled since then, not been reduced. So before those politicians get up there and start like crowing about how oh, it's everywhere and it's all just as bad, again, no, it's not just as bad. Is there racism everywhere? Yes, absolutely. I do definitely feel racism that's brewing here in Vancouver. More, not so much around the Islamic community or Black community. Here, I think it's Asians that get the brunt of it, and it has to do with, I'm sure you've read, these rising prices in real estate, Vancouver West Side and some pockets around Vancouver. Well, guess what, folks? A lot of times it's the same people that are complaining about these issues. They're the ones that are, cashing in. They had a home worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now it's worth a couple of $1 million, and they're more than happy to take that money out and then leave and go somewhere else, but then complain about how they got pushed out of the neighborhood. Now, for younger people that are renting, that is just a gong show there. Hey, it's a world-class city. It's got world-class prices now that reflect that, and there's no easy solutions there. Tina Fontaine, she's in the news right now, as we just alluded to, because she was one of the first women that I didn't realize, actually. It was a great insight there from Tara. I didn't realize that her father was quite prominent in that community, and that may have led to the fact that after she was gone missing and then less than a week later found murdered, that they opened up a huge inquiry into missing and Indigenous women in this country, which is great. It's great, I think, from a lot of hearing a lot of the stories. You're getting a lot of it coming out and helping people deal with some closure on these issues. But in terms of like, what are we doing for First Nations communities? We should all be like feeling guilty as charged that we're not holding our politicians accountable to. Yeah, that's great, like inquiries and study and do this and that. How many friggin' decades can we study the issues for? When are we going to pull out our wallets and say, here's some money for social programs and infrastructure that's going to build your communities from the ground up? Climate change. Should we be talking about climate change? No. Should we be talking about global warming? Yes. Why? Well, climate change used to be called global warming, but what happened is that these corporate elites, they get wrapped around messaging, and they realize that global warming has this kind of alarm bells ringing in people, but all of a sudden climate change, well, that's more of a neutral term that everybody can kind of get around and talk about, and we don't have to worry about whether it be like deniers or people for it that are saying that. But if you notice that there's a real constant theme here, and that is lobbyists figure out how to get terminologies that are easier on their clients. Okay, they get that in the media so that gets repeated over and over and over again, and then us repeat what they've just heard over and over and over again because we want to sound like we're with the most current term, right? Like you used to talk about a gay person, then you started talking about an LGBT person. So it's natural for people to want to feel progressive, like they're talking about the most progressive terms. But this is a great example of how we have to be really careful with the spin that goes on, because that's the kind of brain stuff that goes on out there, and we have to be aware of that. This is Shithole in Chief, quote, "There's a cooling and a heating. Look, it used to not be climate change, it used to be global warming. That wasn't working too well because it was getting too cold all over the place. If the ice caps were going to melt, they'd be gone by now, but they're setting records. They're at a record level." Okay, this is the kind of conversation that we're having, and unfortunately for so many people that don't have an ability to critically think anymore, that stuff is real, and that message gets translated to, oh, thank goodness we've got global warming because that's going to keep us warm, and who wants to be cold, especially in the wintertime when that message can resonate for people like in Florida that are getting these weird snowstorms happening and weather's all over the map. The U.S. Consumer Protection Agency's new budget has just been announced, okay? This is the Consumer Protection Agency. This protects consumers, and their new budget came out, and guess what it is? $0 and 0 cents. That's right, a consumer protection agency with zero funding. We should be talking about corporate greed in the banking sector. In this case, it's HSBC and how they were working in concert with the drug cartels, and I think even Central America. And they found exactly the collusion that went on there, the practices that they had done in the banking sector. And again, nobody charged, nothing happened, business as usual. So the Saudi prince, we've been talking about this story about how they were trying to crack down on corruption, and they reeled in some guys. They made them suffer in the Ritz-Carlton. They put them in prison there for the last couple months while they sort this thing out, and there's still some of them there suffering at the Ritz-Carlton. And they so far have extrapolated $130 billion from what they've deemed to be corporate greed going into the government coffers. Not coincidentally, they happened to have a big shortfall last year because of the price of oil. However, it certainly made me think about for example, to take the banking sector and this $32 billion in profits last year on the heels of another $30+ billion in profits the year before that. Meanwhile, Canadians have the highest consumer debt load in the world. What about that, folks? Why is nobody talking about the corporate greed that's going on with our banks and how they're basically hurting all of our economy and Canadians, their ability to purchase, have purchasing power, to keep the economy strong by having this corporate greed at unbelievable levels. And story after story keeps coming out. Thank you, CBC, for some of your investigation about how these banks, the chartered banks in Canada, are doing illegal practices, calling up people, convincing them that if they buy some of their products or services, they're going to save them money. In fact, that actually lose money. And on the other side, signing them up for accounts without their consent, without their approval. And you hear about these stories, and they get their finger wagged on the news, and then you don't hear about them again. Okay, it certainly beckons back to the financial crisis in the States, where $2 trillion were stolen from the public coffers. They found out they found the guilty parties. They found out exactly what they did. They created Dodd-Franklin bill to make the changes to make sure that didn't happen again. And guess what, folks? No senior bank officials, no senior people at any corporate level were ever charged and convicted of any felonies in that. No change. Dodd-Franklin ended up being so watered down, it basically became nothing because, again, the bank's lobbyists got in there, changed everything. When what does this tell you? This tells you they are above the law, okay? Let me repeat. We are in a state, this is a state of emergency. Sound the alarms, okay? We are at a critical juncture, okay? We have entities, we have corporate elites, we have bankers, we have lawyers, we have heads of corporations on board of governors. They are above the law, folks.
To electric pleasure, bow down into their God. Lost the culture lost. Spun our minds here through time.
Okay, above the law. Now, what happens in our society? It breaks down. It doesn't work. Okay, we are supposed to be a law-abiding nation that follows the rule of law. And we now have people not in government above the law, and governments are or have chosen to do nothing because, there's the same people that are covering the paychecks for government when it comes around election time. And this is why when I talk about electoral reform and Andrew Cohn out there in Toronto, I got to give a shout out to you, man. I know a lot of people think he's a right-wing guy, but last federal election he said he was going to vote NDP. That took a lot of guts coming from, and he was with a right-wing newspaper as well. So the tide is changing. The tide is changing slowly, and we need to be aware of these things because this is news that matters. All right, well, this is Big E from Big E TV, putting on my Coach K hat tonight. Okay, everyone have a great night. We'll see you again soon. And so it's nice to see that we as Canadians do something about, are looking to hopefully encourage people to do something about that.